Hello, this is Donald Jeffries coming to you from just outside the Washington swamp infested Washington, D.C. as I do every Friday at this time. You're listening and watching to I Protest. We have a panel of some of the usual suspects. I feel like I'm doing America Unplugged. So this is, I guess, America Plugged, maybe. So we're doing this. So anyhow, we have the lovely ladies we had here a couple weeks ago, Karen Carpenter and Ashley, the one namer from um, Knights of the Storm. And Jason never comes. Hopefully Jason did anything, but he sends his lovely ladies here. And of course, there's my friend Vince Agnelli. Good to see you, brother.
Sure.
We were just out there at his house earlier this week. He's kindly letting me do some real estate business for him. So we're seeing his huge spread. He's like a South Fork or something, like a ranch or something. So we're just gonna kind of wing it here. We'll talk about what we'll do like to do on America Unplugged. Karen, what do you have on your mind? What do you think the big stories are we should be talking about?
The big stories? Well, I noticed, and this is not the big story, but is a story that Ilhan Omar called Stephen Miller a Nazi, and which I thought was different or interesting. And then the symbol for the Peace Coalition, I'm not sure the exact name Donald Trump is giving it. You need to pay $1 billion to join the Peace Coalition, is very similar to the United Nations symbol, except it's golden, of course. It's in gold, and it's the technate. So I think that's interesting. And the members of his Peace Coalition and how one is joined, including Jared Kushner and just some really the usual suspects, and Bibi Netanyahu, different people. And then I noticed that you had a post of Miss Rachel there who apologized for an anti-Semitic post. I'm familiar with Miss Rachel. She's a megastar children's video person, and I know who she is because I watched a lot of Miss Rachel with my grandson. Mm-hmm. And she and one of we did a show, and I talked about Miss Rachel quite a while back, maybe it's 9 months or so ago, when this happened, and she had expressed her sympathy for the children in Gaza, and apparently that's a big no-no. So those are just some little observations there. It's great to see everybody, Vince. Nice to see you, and Ashley.
Good to see you. And what's this board? I mean, the Board of Peace, talk about Orwellian. So we have Tony Blair, Netanyahu. Is there anybody there that actually has ever advocated peace on there? I don't know. Ashley,
not a single person there is actually a citizen of Gaza, or I mean, I guess Bibi Netanyahu represents Israel.
Yeah, he's representing,
but it's the usual suspects, and you join by paying a large sum of money. And some people are wondering if this is perhaps an alternative to the UN Security Council, and in this multipolar world instead of a unipolar world that we see being possibly set up here.
Ashley, what do you think of that?
So, yes, I definitely think that basically we're looking at a puzzle piece, or a huge puzzle that is the world stage right now, or a chess game, and we're seeing pieces come into place. And I think that we can use our what we know and what the stated plans have been in certain ways in order to see where this is headed. So I definitely think that something like this could be a disruptor, a replacement for another organization as we see where the technocracy is setting up. Is it really going to be the one world government? My answer and my speculation is that yes, it will be that. But will they give the illusion of two sides in the way that we see the politics play out here in the United States? And it may be whatever is coming, this North American technate versus BRICS, however Europe falls into that. So I think there definitely could be, and we know that part of the plan is to bring down these old structures that people know about. And not that I'm saying that they're good, but I'm saying that there is something very symbolic about bringing what people are familiar with down and bringing in something new. And I think that there's a lot of symbolism, of course, with the Trump presidency, when we hear about the new golden dawn, the golden age, a lot of these types of associations, and I don't think that these are by accident. So I definitely think that we are seeing the pieces come together in exactly how that's going to look. I certainly don't know, but I think that we will likely have 2 or 3 major kind of powers, and there's going to be some opposition in there that we'll see. And then as far as my part, what I have been working on and looking at this week is the weather. I've been trying to prepare because I know nobody has gotten by without hearing all about it, but for what could be a major snowstorm in some places and potentially, not to be a fearmonger, but catastrophic ice storm in others, particularly in Appalachia and the Carolinas, where some of the trees are brittle. They haven't fully recovered from the hurricane. The weight that the ice could put on not only the trees, but the infrastructure could be incredibly damaging. So I just, for myself, have been trying to get as prepared as I can and get ready to ride this thing out.
Where are you at, Ashley?
I'm in central North Carolina.
Okay, so you're not that far. Yeah, because I'm in Virginia and Vince is in Virginia. So we're preparing for this Snowmageddon 2 or whatever they're going to call it. But and Vince we'll talk a little about this, but I've lived in this area my entire life pretty much. And I can't tell, and I have a sister that's 19 years older than me. She's lived in this area and we never used to lose power. Never. Once in a while, a thunderstorm for a couple hours. It never occurred to me. All the snow, the blizzards, several of them during my youth, I never once thought the power could possibly go out. And all our lines were above ground. Somehow the ice in those days it was kind of different ice, I guess. It wasn't new age ice or something. It never collected on the lines and got all our lines are underground. And yet we lose power in a hard wind. What are your thoughts on that, Vince? Sitting out there on your palatial estate, probably where there'll be even more snow than where I'm at.
Am I coming in okay? Because you guys are kind of popping in and out.
Yeah, I hear you.
You're pixelating or freezing a little bit, Vince. I can hear everyone else okay, but your sound was breaking up, or your video was breaking up a little bit.
Your video just froze a little, yeah.
Well, being out here in the sticks, that happens.
Yeah,
we all live a pixelated life out here. So the last several days, I've been putting my old body to work and preparing for all of this crazy business. I went out and bought some extra kerosene today, and only to find out that the gas stations around here are running out of gas, and it's stupidity. I don't really need it. But they're talking about ice that's going to knock out the power for a few days.
Well, cool. And they're excited when they say it too. They really get excited.
Oh, I know. But especially here on YouTube. I mean, you get these goofballs on YouTube, these overnight meteorologists, and they love it's the worst thing we've had in whatever years. And I know I talked to you. Well, I talked to you, Don, the other day about how I remember 1970 being not a very good year. And I hate talking about it, but I also studied in college. But I've got the Book of the Year collection for like 50 years from Britannica. So I go pulling off the book for 1970, which is entitled Book of the Year 1971. So they write it in 1971. And then it talks about a lot about the weathermen, the bombings, the kidnappings, the killings. We really haven't seen. The Kent State, and then they had the riot, what they call the Hard Hat Riot, just days after Kent State in New York City, where they turned the unions turned loose all the plumbers and the carpenters who were working on the World Trade Center. They turned them loose on the protests that were out in the street, and they hammered them. I mean, that was a couple of hundred guys, and they hammered. That's not talked about. So the country came to a point where they weren't going to take it anymore. And I think that this country is going to get to that point what happened after that? Nixon takes us off the gold standard. Things just seem to snowball down the tubes. We may be in for another round of that.
If I may,
maybe a break.
I noticed a lot of parallels lately with the 1968, 1970s era, the 60s and 70s, as far as history rhyming. And then, and I vaguely remember the late 60s and the early 70s. But I remember them being very traumatic. I remember the Watergate hearings and the Iran-Contra hearings, the riots, the assassination of RFK, in very turbulent times, a lot of violence, and it was on the TV every night and at 6:00. So of course, we know now a lot of that's orchestrated, but I do see a lot of the similar unrest coming around, that we have these cycles, the fourth turning or whatever catchphrase you'd like to give it.
I know that Dr. Karlin Borisenko gets out on the tube. She's partially correct about things. The guys in the streets don't get that money directly, but there is money that comes from organizations. And I wouldn't say that George Soros is the guy doing any money. If you look back at the World Peace Council, I think it's a World Peace Council, of something the Soviet Union set up, then that ran from like 1965 to 1991. And it's been said they pumped hundreds of millions of dollars into anti-war protests. So that money came through the schools, through the universities. Yes, I'm sure some of that's happening today. Just don't know who it is. We didn't really find out about that until the late 90s, that they came out and admitted that.
We had a crisis actor company, or a persuasion company, approach us to be the CEO to be interviewed on Nights of the Storm. We declined, but thought that was interesting that our humble little podcast had the CEO of a persuader actor type company approach us to be interviewed.
Why didn't you want to interview him? That sounds interesting.
I think that it's a trap. It's a trap. No, I really think that it's not a good idea. I think that we took a look at the company and the person who wanted to be interviewed, and he didn't really give you a straight answer about much of anything. We could have asked him if he provides the bricks at the riots, etc. But I just didn't think that it was a good idea.
And one thing I wanted to chime in for myself and what Vince was talking about, as far as, yes, the universities being involved in, and I don't even, not speaking directly towards the protests that we have seen, or like the BLM protests that were very destructive in some places. But I think that and you said we don't know who it is, and I think that's very fair. I say the cryptocracy, right? Because we have these organizations that are all interlocking and connected, and they connect to each other in the web, and they have access to funds. And so I think that a lot of it is coming from there, and that is how they're able to bury it and keep it from our purview, and leave us to try to speculate as best as we can. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, as far as the similar unrest that we've been seeing, I have seen things that are evocative of that era as well, and that are evocative images from Vietnam. So I find it to be very interesting that yes, the United States has bases all over the world. We know that. We know about the coup in Venezuela, but what we don't have is an active hot war, which I find to be very interesting, because that would be, and I'm not wishing this in any way into existence, but that would be the huge tie-in with that time, because we know that Vietnam was a very predominant theme. It was very politically important during that time, and people were speaking out of it. About it. It was a divisive topic, and of course, it took many fighting age young men off of the playing board, essentially, and it served a lot of a lot of reasons, but that's one thing. And then the other thing I wanted to tie back into the weather piece that we're seeing is that I was talking to one of my friends, shout out Dustin Helm, about the rolling blackouts that happened in Texas in 2021. So wherever we're at, never let a good crisis go to waste. So I think that even if we do see this catastrophic power outages and things like that in some places, I think that we can't not consider the possibility of some testing, whether that would be rolling blackouts to see how the populace would
Yes.
be willing to accept that. And these types of things. I think that the other thing in the aftermath of this, first of all, I hope that's not going to be as bad as they're saying and that people are staying safe. And I'm definitely concerned about the elderly who don't have access to getting resources and maybe not even have a contact out there to check on them. And some of the temperatures are just going to be devastatingly cold. So I'm concerned about that. But after we get through that, I'm going to be interested to look at this from just the analysis perspective to see how it was managed. Now, I've seen a lot of people talking and it sounds pretty normal. Like my so-and-so that I know, they are working as a lineman. They've got the crews ready. I have linemen in my family as well. They're out working in Georgia all the way through this. So I'm just going to be interested to see what kind of things we may learn ourselves, what sorts of behaviors, if there is more rolling blackouts testing for us to look out on after the fact.
Yeah, well, you're right, Ashley. And I think, again, I can't be the only one that was alive in this area that's still around. Remembers a different reality. But I'm telling you, this was not the case. Nobody would have ever considered. Vince is holding up something. What is that? Okay, crisis theory.
Crisis theory.
Marx. Okay, yeah, okay, exactly.
Karl Marx.
And Rahm Emanuel, whoever. But yeah, and it's what gets me is that there's no criticism allowed of so many things. But I'm the only one that ever mentions this. Nobody even criticized in our we have Dominion power. That's what we have here. We have VDOT in terms of they don't even. Vince probably remembers this. I remember when the last blizzard, they literally shut down parts of the Beltway. I mean, they didn't even attempt to plow. This is nobody complains. So, okay, that's normal. That makes sense. And that they already sent out their emails. The power company said, be safe. Be safe without heat if you're old. What do you mean be safe? You have electric heat. Be safe. Expect power outages. Mm-hmm. Now there used to be a great website. I don't know if you ever guys, well, you're not, Vince is in this area. It was called Fairfax Underground here. And it talked about all the local areas. It was wonderful. I mean, it had a lot of crazy, they would throw porn and stuff in there too to mess it up. And that's what took it down, you think. But they would do local, observing. So during with the last big snowstorm, when people like me were raging about, how's the power out in certain areas, these guys would drive past the Dominion plant and observe all of the trucks still parked in the parking lot. They weren't even out to do anything. That's real journalism. And of course, it's not allowed. But that's what I keep my eye on. It really ticks me off because this is something we experience on the ground level and nobody talks about it. You have these brain dead reporters that'll be sitting there watching a snowplow. And the other favorite trick of plows around here is they will drive down the road with their plow up in the air. They're not even attempting to plow, or they'll sit idly on the side of the street and the reporter's watching the plow and, hey, your journalistic skills are missing here. You might want to ask him, why is your plow in the air? What's the point of driving on the road with your plow in the air? And they have a thing, supposed to have a reason for it. No, it makes no sense. But anyhow, it's one of my pet peeves. And I bought a backup generator. It's a small one just for this because I don't trust it. But I mean, I'll be able to, have a light, charge up cell phones, maybe a crock pot to boil something in. But this is terrible for people that don't have that. I'm sorry. End of rant.
I just wanted to say I live in California, so I have the infamous criminals, PG&E, our power company, and for years we've had these horrendous fires, droughts. The wind would blow and the power would be turned off, and of course, as a kid, we never lost power, or if we did, it was back on quickly. I believe the grid has been allowed to degrade purposefully. There were calls to harden the grid years ago, and it never happened as far as I know. I know roads are degrading, and of course this is a great opportunity to take down more infrastructure, to the nothing like weather freezing and thawing to degrade wood, power lines, concrete, bridges, all of the heavy winds and freezing, thawing, freezing, heavy rainfall, all of those things will degrade the infrastructure. And as you said, it's not being repaired, it's not being maintained. So of course we're seeing the move toward energy for me, but not for thee. So I think that this is possibly a good opportunity to move toward that. But also, as you were saying, to test people. And I've heard rumors that the toilet paper disappeared again. And I think that that's an op. I don't think people really rush out at this point and buy toilet paper first. I think it's more batteries, water, canned foods. I don't think that people actually go and stock up on toilet paper first. I don't think that's the first thing that would go. Hopefully not at this point. So my thoughts and prayers are with all of you that are possibly going to be victims of weather warfare. However, we all have been at this point. I think there really is nowhere to run to, nowhere to hide.
Yeah, they keep spraying.
They absolutely do.
They were spraying today.
I was talking to some friends who are somewhat aware, not quite so much as we are, and they were talking about the spraying. And so I shared some links to different documentaries, Frankenskies, geoengineeringwatch.org, Climate Viewer, different sites, and just the different ways to find out about some information about these things. And I let them know that there have been 2 states that have banned chemtrails, Tennessee and Florida, but they're still being geoengineered, geoengineered. So that doesn't really matter. It's coming, I think, from a higher level, DARPA or a higher authority. So yeah, it's worrisome, but I think we need to be prepared and try not to live not too much in fear.
No, and I think people, Patrick Stanton says weather modification has hit the mainstream. It's true. People are talking about it, but again, we just kind of, we know it's happening. But again, just the idea, and this is the public wheel guy, when you go down as low as you can. Okay, if you can't have any kind of protest against something like this, I mean, if you're without, we had something in Virginia probably about 15 years ago. I had never heard the word derecho before. I'm convinced they just made it up. It was a thunderstorm, and they said it was a derecho. What the hell's a derecho? I've never heard that. And our power was out for 5 days. It was sunny outside and everything, and I was so incensed because again, this is third world stuff, but it is testing. They're testing. That's kind of a rolling blackout there because they know no matter what they do, they could probably have it out for 6 months. How many people do you think would protest? People are so passive now. I don't think they'll protest. Grandma froze to death, the last time, but well, that happens. They did everything they could. They won't hold the people accountable at that local level. Go when our power company had all their trucks in the parking lot there. I don't think that guy made that up. You should have had people out there protesting in front of them. Why are your trucks here? And the congressional representative, I guess they can't even, protest that. Because they know it's part of the plan, I guess. I don't know. You guys see any sense in what I'm saying?
Well, in that derecho that you're talking about, we lost power for 7 days.
Yeah.
And it was pretty hot. The summers here was June. Summers here in Virginia get not just hot but very humid, and the humidity can really melt you. But years before that, when we first moved out here, Don, I guess it was 2003 or 2004, we had a big storm, but it was an ice storm on top of the snow, which is what we're expecting now. Mm-hmm. We were without power for 10 days.
Yeah.
And I was worried that I was coming down with hypothermia because I couldn't use the fireplace. It wasn't ready yet. And I had this kerosene heater. Still had the horses then. And whenever the water would melt off the roof, I would grab it outside and clean it and get it to the horses. But that was also the stuff I was using to flush the toilets. I mean, you got to do that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I had to go out on the 9th day. I went out and bought a few cartons of water. I managed to find a place that had some water, and that kept me and the animals alive. And on the 10th day, they showed up right down the street, and they cleared off a couple of trees on that line. That's all it took.
Yeah.
And we were back on.
Yeah. And normally, whenever you're trying to prepare for something like this, they tell you to prepare for, like 3 days basically is on the low end. And if that's all you can do, and we know how much the regular person has been completely squeezed. And if you're trying to be completely prepared for everybody in your house, that's water that you're purchasing. And maybe you purchase a generator, or you have propane heaters or things like that. These things are not cheap. They
Sure
are
don't.
not cheap. If you try to have some sort of backup internet, like a mini Starlink, something like that, that's not cheap. Yes, it could be important for you in your neighborhood, and hopefully somebody in your neighborhood has it. But just the Starlink mini alone is, depending on where you buy it from, first of all, on short notice from the Tesla website, it was like 2 or 3 weeks out. Buy it on Amazon, you're paying like $500 for that, plus what some battery backup source in order to run it. And of course, like for me, I don't want to be participating in the satellite coverage of the entire globe. But on the same note, if you have in your household or people in your neighborhood that having internet access could be life-saving for somebody, especially because I have a lot of elderly in the neighborhood, what are you supposed to do? But not everybody can afford to even prepare for all of this stuff. And then and certainly if it goes longer than that 3-day general guideline, Vince, like what you're talking about, you may run out of supplies. So that's a concern. But one thing, Don, I was going to tell you is that growing up in Western North Carolina, we did have a couple of events in my lifetime that we had extended power outages. So the first one was Hurricane Hugo in 1989, which if anybody's out there listening familiar with that, it was a devastating hurricane. Once again, in Western North Carolina, nothing like Helene, but it was very, very damaging, catastrophic. And so that was a huge ordeal. And then in 1993, we had another, and it may have been in Virginia as well, but we had a giant snowstorm.
Yes,
in
we
93.
did.
Yeah.
That's the first one I ever had. Yeah.
And then in the interim, we've had some icing events, but both of those caused major, major power outages. And that was a long time ago from my, just my anecdotal 2 cents.
Well, that's
there.
you're young in that, and that's the change that I saw. Again, the 93 event you're talking about. Yeah, I think we were power for 5 days. We were living in a townhouse, and I was again so incensed, but there's nobody I can protest to. I want to protest. That's why I call it I protest. Who am I going to protest to? Even my neighbors, they're just passive. Smiling and no, you're making the best of it. You're assuring it's going to happen again. So my point was, and my sister goes way back to the 40s as a little kid, and they never lost power then. How is that possible? Now they would tell you, well, there's more people. We also should have advanced technology, right? That should offset that. And having the power lines underground as ours should make it impossible to have power outages. How did I have those old-fashioned, growing up, those ridiculous power lines that ice could have formed on easily? It never occurred to me that we had ice storms. I never thought for a second, I'm going to lose power. I'm a little kid, bouncing around. I'm not going to have power, no lights, no heat. It never happened. How is that possible? But there's nobody out there but me saying it. So I guess maybe I just lived in in some kind of a zone, a bubble or something, but I don't think so.
No, I think that's I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say really quick. I think that's exactly right, Don. That's a great point. And what Karen was saying is so true. And what she's saying is that by neglecting the grid and the infrastructure all of these years, knowing that that toll was going to come due and not doing it, knowing that we are one of the wealthiest nations in the entire world, that is not by accident. And like what she's saying, once this grid is crumbling and it's in such a state, wouldn't it be very convenient for people who are interested in building back better?
Mhm.
And of
Mhm.
course, that is a control mechanism over the populace. And we have seen the different things that they have put out there that we know that they are weaving together in this tyrannical blanket to throw on us. You know, the thread of the digital ID, the digital gulag, whatever you want to say, UBI, digital money, all of these things are, work very, very well, go hand in hand with controlling your, oh, well, you said something I didn't like online this week. Guess whose power is going off? Beep, you're done.
Right. We have to tear it down to build it back better. I wanted to mention that here in California, we actually had what they called a hurricane a few years ago. Excuse me, we do not get hurricanes in California, but apparently we do now. And then you had the advent of the term bombogenesis and rain bombs, several other weather events that nobody's ever heard
Oh,
of.
La Nina and El Nino.
Atmospheric,
Remember that? And
atmospheric
the,
river.
Right.
The
Yeah. The
atmospheric river.
atmospheric river being steered.
Yeah.
So I think that people really don't have much of a grasp on, generally speaking, on the ability of the weather to actually be manipulated. And what Lyndon Johnson said in the 60s, he who controls the weather controls the world. And I believe that there were treaties that didn't allow weather warfare for long periods of time. How I don't believe those exist at this point, but for decades there were actual international treaties that didn't allow weather to be used as a weapon. So I think we're seeing that, unfortunately, against our own quote unquote government, our government using weather as a weapon against us. And then the fires in California, the path of the high-speed rail was actually burned. I mean, I have the maps going way back and with these fires. So I think that the fires are engineered, and the chemicals that are being sprayed tend to be accelerants, sparkler dust, aluminum, titanium, strontium, barium, lithium. So we're up against it. So I would hope that most people have enough awareness to be more prepared than 3 days. I've talked to people in line at different stores off and on it, and quite a few people tell me they have a few tubs in the garage that are full of food and items as far as preparedness. So I hope that people are starting to become more aware that they need to be prepared to handle things themselves. But it would be interesting to see how quickly people panic without their phones and the internet. And we used to be the power would go out and the phone would still work.
Yeah.
We don't have that anymore. Once your cell phone dies, that's it.
well, we have an old-fashioned landline. Yeah, I have a landline too.
There's no landline available at my house.
Interesting.
Yes, in fact, what they do now is that they want to put a cellular box on the back of your house and then hook that into the wires of the old system in your house. And then they tell you, oh, well, that's a wire. This is good. No, I don't want that other thing. I got it.
I realized for after I had been paying for a landline for several years that it didn't work unless our Wi-Fi was working. So that's when I realized this is not a landline if the Wi-Fi has to work. So I finally quit paying for it. But
Bingo.
Yeah,
I had inquired about one several years ago, and they were like, it doesn't exist. You have to have, it has to use the infrastructure in place for internet.
Yep.
It is no longer, what we ever thought about. And so if your internet is down in all intents and purposes, in that case, so is your landline. Now, here's something interesting. This past week, there was was it the beginning? It was last week. There was the Verizon outage. And I was very curious about what was the purpose of that, if anything. Do I believe that was simply an accident? No. That's just my speculation, though. But I will say that I knew people who had two phones, one personal cell phone, one business cell phone. Everything was on Verizon. Personal cell phone does not work. Business cell phone continued to work, no problem. So this was like a one-day thing, but it was a major Verizon outage, and people were were really ticked about it. Understandably so, because it is such an important part to our day-to-day lives now, and for everything from communicating with your family to work. But there was an option there, and this wasn't rolled out last week or anything, but there's an option that they now have for using a satellite to make calls. So that was something that people had experience with potentially using last week whenever they did not have their normal Verizon coverage. So I thought that that was an interesting thing, and certainly an interesting event to happen before what we see supposedly coming this weekend.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, but again, it goes to the fact that of how we have no leadership at all. That's why I can't argue with the anarchists, because we have any leadership at all. You would have in my area and areas like ours, certainly about Appalachia after the hurricane experience with FEMA not getting there and everything, you would have people in those areas demanding hearings in Congress. And you would hold, in the case of the hurricane, you would be grilling FEMA officials about all the reports that they were impeding rescue efforts and not letting people be rescued. And in case of our area, in places like that, you would, after the derecho and crazy stuff like that, you would have them in, and you would have people presumably in Congress old enough that lived in this area remember a different reality. Say, how do we lose power for 5 days for that? Explain to me. What happened? We have witnesses that drove by your power plant and saw all your trucks in your parking lot. Exactly what are you doing here? That was summer when people were hot. This happens in the winter. People can freeze to death, especially old people. How do you do this? But nobody says a word about it. Instead, it's just be prepared. What do you mean be prepared? Let's say you're I don't know, you're somebody that's has asthma. I don't know, somebody old, and you're already in kind of a precarious position. And sure, maybe you can move in with one of your kids briefly or something, but they might lose their power. So, but nobody talks about it. It just, and I hate, during the end of my experience with IT, we had a big control center, and they demanded that the Weather Channel be on all the time. I don't know why. So, but it had to be the stupid Weather Channel, and that is the dumbest. Those people are so stupid. They get so excited. It's going to be 2006. I mean, it's like they're coming through the screen. Verbal orgasms nonstop. And, 6 inches. And I don't know how people watch that. And you can see in the local news, nobody watches local news, but around here, they're watching it now because, how many inches are we going to get? I don't know. Maybe you guys certainly out in California, I know you have a completely different experience out there, Karen. That would come into play, I guess, with an earthquake possibility, but I guess hurricanes now.
A lot of earthquake activity. There's been earthquake activity this week, and are warnings about earthquakes. I don't live in a big earthquake area. I had my grandparents all lived where the Loma Prieta earthquake was, and I was sitting in a class finishing up my teaching credential at Fresno State, and my desk started rocking. It was a night class, the night of the World Series starting, and I thought, oh no, there's a big earthquake. I wonder where it was, and it was right where my grandparents and my relatives all lived, and so their chimneys fell down. A few people died. My uncle ended up buying a house that was shifted, so it was a 2-level house, and he bought it at a great price and put it back together right on the fault line, right where the Loma Prieta earthquake happened. And my cousins ended up selling it after he passed away for well over $1 million. But yeah, the earthquakes are an issue here where I am. I don't live in fear of earthquakes, but it's definitely something to think about. One time, back when waterbeds were popular, we had an earthquake, and all the waterbeds in the house, and I think I was working night shift at the Del Monte Peach Cannery and sleeping during the day. And my dad came and got me, and the waterbed was rocking. And we ran out in the backyard, and the swimming pool was sloshing out of the pool. It was a doughboy. My brothers had dug the doughboy into the ground, and the pool was sloshing. So it is interesting. Usually, when you have an earthquake, you see the ceiling fan swing, or the lights, the jangling pendant lights will swing, and we must have just had an earthquake. And then fairly soon there'll be an announcement on the local news, as you say. For me personally, I worry about how power outages in the summertime, as Vince was mentioning. It can get well over 100 here, and then it can stay 85, 90 in the at all night. Once in a while, it'll stay over 80 degrees, and I don't do well with that kind of heat. And I can only imagine if it was humid. We don't have the humidity, but last summer we had an outage at night, overnight, and it was one of those really hot times. And I thought, oh my gosh! I texted my daughter, said our power is out. Is your air conditioner working? So I was going to go to my daughter's house where there's air conditioning if the power stayed out too long. But we did actually have a truck come in the middle of the night. All the neighbors are standing outside because it's too hot to sleep. And they did fix the outage. So I was really grateful to see that. But it's interesting that Vince is talking about seeing snow trucks, the plows, driving with the plows up, but not
Yes,
plowing.
always.
And I wonder if it's union, if it's not union hours, or if they're being paid not to plow, or it's interesting the way that works.
Well, let me plug something in here for you. So, Don, out here, the plowing is done by the farmers.
Oh,
so
okay.
the state actually pays the farmers, and trust me, the farmers never miss a chance to put that plow on the ground.
Right. Sure.
Even if they're plowing.
Farmers doing it here.
Yeah. So a lot of those guys up there in the VDOT trucks, they're working for the machine, the big machine. And when it comes to the phone line, and you know me, I'm a letter writer. I'm one of those guys. I'm such a pain in the butt. The one congressman we started off with out here actually got angry with me, and he redrew the district right around our house.
More letters from Vince.
Yeah. So even if you're small, you still can be a pain in their butt. The phone company said, because we've had problems with them all the time. Whenever it rains, it gets buzzy on the line, and I tell them to go fix it. They go fix it. But it always comes back. And they said, Verizon doesn't have to fix it or replace it, put it that way. They only have to fix something that's absolutely dead, but they won't replace any of the infrastructure. And they actually blamed it on our local government because the local government refused to let them put in the FiOS years ago. And they wanted to maintain this old system. Well, that's out there, and they will repair it when it breaks, but it's got to break, and they'll never fix the real inherent problems you get with aged out infrastructure. They just won't do it. I have written Congress. You don't even get a word back. It's, forgive me for saying it, but isn't the Federal Communications Commission set up by Congress to regulate this stuff, to make these guys take their monopoly and not screw the people over? But we get it anyway. We get,
It's absolutely. Anybody want to tackle that question from Duke Valentino? Do you think that the vax contains nanotech? Why do the jabs emit Bluetooth?
Yep, I believe it.
I think they do too. And I actually did that experiment. I walked into a family member's house, and lo and behold, there were a lot of addresses that were not traceable. Yeah, I do believe that. Yeah.
So if you needed any other reason not to get vaxxed.
I think the nanotech is in the food anyway.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, it's not just the vaccines. It's all over the place. It's, as Karen has said, the stuff that's coming down from the sky.
Yep.
That stuff is metallic, and it has different properties. You breathe it in, you wear it on your skin, you intake it by food and water. It's horrible.
Under an ionized sky, Dr. Alana Freeland has done some great work, and Clifford Carnicom writing about the ionization of the sky with frequencies and metals, and I absolutely believe that that's happening.
Well, I tried to tell Jason a long time ago about the case that the U.S. Army had to settle out of court for guys that were working on the transmitters like he used to work on. And the government has admitted that, yes, these X-ray things giving off from the tubes and so forth on transmitters, that is creating ionizing radiation. And really, radiation being ionizing, it got compartmentalized. So they just wanted to say, well, it's only uranium or plutonium or what. No, it's anything that generates that frequency and radiates. That's radiation. So that's why the microwave oven is such a dangerous beast. That's actually a vacuum tube. You know, the magnetron is a vacuum tube inside of that thing.
I know you're an expert on this topic, Vince, and I know quite a bit, but not nearly as much as you do. But I do think that that classifying radiation as ionizing or non-ionizing, I think, is a bait and switch or a misnomer.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yep.
And I saw that RFK Jr. is making a move to get cell phones out of schools, and I know people are very critical of RFK Jr., but he is talking about taking cell phones out of schools because of the EMF dangers. And he's, Children's Health Defense did a lot of work over the years trying to get publicized the dangers of EMFs and cell towers, cell phones, and all of the different weaponized technology. And so I know that he's well aware of that.
So Karen, let me ask Don this. Now, Don knows the high school I went to.
Yep.
Don, when's the last time you've been up there in their parking lot?
I've driven past it, I guess, recently. I haven't been in the parking lot for a long time.
Well, the next time you drive up Burke Lake Road, passing the field, the ball field, without getting into a wreck, take a look over at the light poles on the back of the stadium there. They've got an array right on top of that stadium. And even though that they give kind of a lobe radiation for the signal, that's coming right down at the school, right down at that Lake Braddock. It's the name of the school.
That's
yeah,
my
that's
kids.
bad.
Well, what's their rationale if anybody questions about why they need that? What is the good purpose they claim, or do they even claim that's a purpose?
I don't think that they have to do it.
Yeah.
They don't. They just now they can come at the county and say, we'll give you a 99-year lease on that light pole if you let us put that array up there. And the county says, oh, well, that's money. Yeah, sure, give me the money.
Mm-hmm.
I actually know a guy whose dad worked for Mark Warner when he owned Nextel and helped set up he was an engineer, and he helped set up the cellular system for the Saudi Arabians, which they told me that apparently Mark Warner broke a number of laws. But who's going to do anything about that? So they actually own a few spots up in Maryland and Pennsylvania with towers on it, and they get revenue.
Right. There's the school. There's an elementary school half a mile from me. They put up during COVID. They put up a cell phone antenna, and I thought, oh my goodness! I thought that people in this neighborhood would be more aware of that and more concerned for their kids' health. Nothing. It's still there, but they put a tube on it, a shield, so that it just looks like a pipe sticking up. But it's right in the middle of the classroom area on an elementary school playground. It's awful.
Right where Don meets me for lunch.
Right, exactly. We're being inundated. But what is the? I mean, why do? I mean, again, I guess nobody but people like us are even questioning them. But what is their rationale for why they need this radiation? What good purpose do they claim it serves? Why is it necessary?
Well, they don't admit that it's radiation.
Okay, so they don't want to.
And as Karen said, they use the term non-ionizing. So that's hiding what's really taking place. And as I said, the Army settled out of court for those guys working on those transmitters. And that goes all the way back to the Loran transmitters, which were used before we had GPS satellites telling the planes where they were. So that goes back a long way. And the Loran C transmitters, as I recall, they had a lot of people who were getting cancer and leukemia who lived around these transmitter sites. And, you know, a part of my education is in broadcast engineering. I can tell you that you don't see old guys working in the transmitters. They just don't. They get cancer in their 50s and 60s and they're gone.
You see more suicide or mental health issues in that field of work?
No, not really. I mean, the guys who are actually working in the transmitters are usually pretty busy and they have a good steady job and it pays well. I've not seen any of that before. I just know that cancer grabs these people really badly.
I know there have been cases settled. There was a cell phone tower on top of a college lecture hall, and somebody's daughter got a brain tumor, and that was settled in favor of the young woman's family. And then here in town, there's a cancer cluster under quite a few high tension wires on top of a school.
Yep.
And so that, I believe that was settled in court in favor of the people that got the cancer, although the wire lines are still there. So I don't know how that works out, but there have been a few cases. But generally speaking, most people, if you say that cell phones are dangerous, or maybe you should think, if you're not feeling well, you might think about taking your whatever Fitbit or your iWatch off. They look at you like you're just.
And now they have the ring too, don't they? They have the.
I don't know. Yep. I do know the first time I was ever on Don's show, it was because he was doing a show about EMF sensitivity, and if I wear the wireless earbuds, the whatever those things are called, I feel like I'm dying. I just feel terrible if I wear those. I wore them for a week one time, and I told my friend, "What is wrong with me? I feel terrible." And I thought, "What have I changed? I'm wearing these wireless earbuds."
So do you see that set that Don has on right there? If you took an electromagnetic meter to those, it would fly off the handle.
Being inundated as we speak.
Sorry, buddy.
Don't affect me. I don't know.
Sorry, I've done
I'm
it.
no crazier than I've always been.
You know, it's even in. You know, you get the stuff in your power lines in your house.
I have a question for Vince. I mean, we know we need to get Ashley in, but Jason just got fiber optic. What do you think about fiber optic?
As long as you're not receiving it, you know, as long as it's not around you and you're not catching the light that's coming at you, because that's all frequency. That's all frequency. It's not electricity per se. Not like we're talking about with, 120 volts or 240 volts or whatever, thousands of volts out there on the power lines. So it's a little different. I know that there have been people in the EMF area who say that they think that it's safer, put it that way. They think it's safer. But now I've heard recently that there are people who say that it's not safe. So, as I said before, anything with frequency, and even if it's in the light spectrum, that's still frequency. Something that's hitting you at a speed or with enough power can do the same kind of damage.
And I've heard talk of people that had old lamps that had huge magnets in them, that those actually had harmful effects on people, that even magnetic frequencies or forces, fields, can cause issues. I think what I read and heard about with the fiber optic is it depends on the delivery method. If you've got a router, that may be an issue. The router that they give you if you have to change your router out, possibly more dirty electricity or some kind of frequencies not going through the lines in your house, etc.
Yep. No, it's dirty. Sorry, dear.
Yeah, no worries. One thing that I wanted to put on the radar, and I know that Don is working on a sports book, and he is interested in sports in general, and that it was my contention that after the rollout of the mRNA medical procedure in 2020, 2020, well, really it was like early 2021 that people started receiving this en masse. And then we went into the NFL season after that. And of course, we saw that a lot about died suddenly, but I was paying attention to the amount of injuries that was happening in the NFL. And so I always felt like there was many increased injuries, and a lot of them were dealing with our connective tissue. And so it was my thought that it has a weakening effect. So not only on the heart with the myocarditis, pericarditis, all the carditises, with the clotting factor, with the turbo cancer, like all of the stuff that we saw, but that it was also increasing and contributing to injury. Then just this, like in the last couple of weeks, somebody by the name of @living_energy on Twitter posted low frequency electromagnetic fields can degrade collagen, weaken tendons, and cause soft tissue damage at levels regulators call safe. We have a real world case study proving this. An NFL team whose practice facility sits next to a massive electrical substation. So this is where it kind of gets into the meat of the story. And I'm not going to read everything to y'all, but I just wanted to put this out there and see if you had heard about it. But he said the San Francisco 49ers are statistically the most injured team in the NFL over the past decade since moving to Levi's Stadium in 2014. Top 5 in adjusted games lost for 10 of 11 seasons, 7 to 8 full Achilles and patellar ruptures, 40 plus major hamstring and calf tears, high ankle syndesmosis, I may not be saying that correctly, injuries every single year. No other franchise comes close. None of the usual explanations, which would be like turf, scheme, bad luck, hold up. Only one variable is unique, and the players know it in their guts. In early 2025, retired guard John Feliciano let it slip. Players have joked around about there being an electrical substation right next to the practice field and how that has led to the Niners' injury problems. And so he goes on. This is like quite an extensive thread. He's done a lot of good work on it. And of course, this is one of the reasons that the term conspiracy theorist has gotten the attention that it's gotten, because what it does is when people hear this, in some certain sets, it allows them to automatically dismiss your premise and your thoughts without actually considering what you're saying. And this guy's saying, I was injured and I was dealing with issues with EMF and I did the research. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Here it is, laid out very plainly. And he's like, you can call me a conspiracy theorist if you want to, but you can't account for that. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to put that out there and see if y'all had seen that and looked into that. And I thought that Don would be interested.
No, I have heard that, and the 49ers do have more injuries than anybody else. But I also, again, because I think these things are rigged anyhow. But I think a lot of the injuries don't make any sense to me when I watch them. I don't understand how they can be injured that way. I think that's part of the corruption, that certain players go down. Because when I see some of the injuries, it's like, how's that possible? If you worked a regular job and you claimed, well, I was walking across the practice field and I tore my Achilles, that happens all the time. Nobody would, okay, I guess you're going to be out for a year. Well, no, nobody would believe that. So we had a thing with Bo Nix, a quarterback for the Broncos, who injured himself in the last play of the game. He should have been kneeling down, but he just kind of rolled to his right, and it's just a regular tackle, and he somehow fractured his ankle. I don't know. But yeah, I question all of it. I question everything about sports, and it'll all be in my book. But I have heard that about the 49ers. They are by far the most injured team in football. And Peter's not a sports fan, but he lives in San Francisco. So I don't know. Karen is, but I don't know if she's noticed that or not.
Let's see if Dawn remembers this. And ladies, I don't know if you've ever tried to look this up, but you guys are so young. So
Ashley is not me.
Don's old enough. You remember, wasn't it the Giants that after they moved to the Meadowlands, Giant Stadium, that they started to come down with a lot more instances of cancer? Might
I
want to look
haven't
that
heard that. No, but that's interesting. No, I
because
definitely.
the stadium was built on a landfill.
Interesting.
Yes, and also turf.
Right.
The people that use AstroTurf, and that is damaging for not only the big league players, but it's damaging for children as well. And if you want your kids outdoors playing sports and they enjoy it, I don't really know how you could get around that. Just try to minimize it as best you can, but the turf is not healthy either. And one of the things, real quick, that I wanted to throw in there as far as Don's discussion on injuries, I 100% agree. I think that we know that there is huge money and that cannot be denied in sports betting, especially with the rise of DraftKings and all of this other betting that's being crammed down our throats constantly.
Yes.
So I think that thinking about people being incentivized to throw games even slightly, we can't discount that. And I know that there was the betting scandal in the NBA not too long ago, but I felt like that sounded like small potatoes, and I felt like maybe this is just being put out there so you don't actually see the full extent of this insane corruption. However, the other thought that I had as far as people getting actually really and truly injured is that obviously in the case of the 49ers, I think that is a very interesting hypothesis that this guy's working with. I also think that the diet for the average person has gotten a lot worse. And I think that these kids are playing high level sports at a young age that is also setting them up for injuries, even though they're in their early 20s, because their bodies have been absolutely brutalized. And in some ways, very unfortunately, and don't shoot me if you're a football fan or if your kids play, I'm just saying in some ways it's like child sacrifice, because you're letting your child go out there and get hit in the head. And so not only are you setting up the potential for the CTE, now I have questions about that. We can get into that or not, but I'm just saying that, and then just getting hit for years on end. When kids are pitching, when little boys are pitching, they limit the amount of pitches that a little boy can throw in a game in order to try to protect his arm. I personally don't think that's enough, but I'm just saying there are limits. So we don't necessarily see that unless there's fear of a concussion in a football situation. And adding to it the recent mRNA medical procedure and some of these other things. And I really quickly want to throw out there the story of Aaron Hernandez. And so there's a couple of documentaries that are pretty comprehensive about his story. And I think it's fair to at least question whether or not he did have CTA or CTE combined with some pretty significant lifetime trauma that sort of affected his behavior and his relationship with other people. But one of the things that I found was very interesting is the conversation, because he was playing at, I guess it was the Florida Gators maybe, and with Tim Tebow.
Yes.
But what kind of medication was being administered to these kids? They're young kids, and they were saying that they would inject them with painkillers and all kinds of other things just to let them limp along through the game, just to keep them playing. So in my overall idea about the injuries at that level of sports, I think that betting, faking is certainly possible, but I also think that we're in a little bit of a different situation with the exposure to medications, early age football, and all this other stuff that is affecting what we see now.
Let me throw in my little 2 cents about sports. I've been a lifelong. I remember when Pete Rose was a fantastic baseball player and got banned from baseball for betting, which I think was probably minor compared to what's going on now
Yes.
at a large scale. And I always felt bad that he was banned from baseball, and bad for him. And I'm not saying that I condone what he was doing, but I do remember that the big red machine. But and I remember Buster Posey severing his Achilles tendon when he was, I believe, a rookie for the San Francisco Giants, and rehabbing and going on to have a great career, which is pretty astounding. And I do have a relative who played for the San Francisco Giants and does have traumatic brain injury from concussions. Yes. And also so that's very real. It's happened to a member of my family. I worry about my nephew who played football and had several concussions as a young player. And people just thought it was wonderful that he was kept going back in. And I was very, very concerned about his memory loss and confusion. And we'll see what happens at some point. Then I wanted to add about, as far as collagen goes, we've seen a huge uptick in the popularity of collagen supplements. You've got collagen everywhere on the market now. Several brands. You see it in Costco and the other warehouse stores. You see it everywhere being advertised. It's not cheap. Bone broth is very popular, and that's also collagen and other similar things that are great for us, connective tissue type things. And then you also had glyphosate, which is Roundup, which is ubiquitous, which has been connected with the protein stacking in bones and connective tissues. And there were racehorses in the Los Angeles area that it was found that they were having a lot of broken bones, the racehorses, and it was connected to the glyphosate in their food supply. So, of course, what have you got there, Vince?
Keep talking.
Best if
Reading
used
the ingredients for potato chips.
The ingredients,
and you're eating bioengineered food.
oh, bioengineered, genetically modified. Yes.
Yeah.
We talked about that the other day, and I was trying to explain to somebody today the difference between GMO and bioengineered. And I think those terms keep changing. And then you've got regenerative farming, which that term is being used now as an undercover word for sustainability. So regenerative farming now is not what it used to be. And the language is used as a weapon and keeps changing and morphing. But I just don't want to underestimate the glyphosate that's been in our diet, and so many people needing joint replacements. I think about generations ago, I had a great aunt who lived to be 105. She never needed a hip replacement, knee replacement. Her bones were strong. Her joints were fairly healthy. She walked with a walker after she was 95. But, I had a lot of relatives live well into their 90s, and they didn't get joint replacements. And here I am with two knees actually that are really shot. So I do believe that there is cumulative damage from EMFs, even low-grade exposure to EMFs to our bodies, of course, especially soft tissues, water. It affects water, and the joints especially depend on having a good hydration, and then also the glyphosate. And John, I wanted to ask you if you're familiar with Zachary Hubbard, the YouTuber. If you're writing a book about sports, you got to check out Zachary Hubbard. He does a YouTube channel using gematria to predict sports outcomes, and he does very well. A lot of people are making a lot of money placing bets using Zach Hubbard's gematria tied in with sports predictions. Every week he has winners. He has a Patreon where he makes predictions based on the gematria. It's a big deal.
I have to check him out. I would think you need inside information though, because I think
link. He's been doing that for at least. Well, I've been aware of him for a good 5 years at least, and he uses and then ties it in with sports history, world events, and can predict the outcomes of games. And people are betting and making money using his predictions.
My friend Brian Toohey, who I've had on my show years, he wrote the Fixes In some years back and he beat me to it. But back in the day, I had everybody that knew me. I had them all convinced the NFL and the NBA were fixed. I think they're fixed. I think they've been fixed for a long time. But now a lot of people are discovering that. Last year, you had people talking about the Chiefs, especially because Mahomes, and they got so many calls. They won so many games. It was so obvious. So you had Twitter. It was trending everywhere. And this year, you had a couple games where the last game of the season, ancient Pete Carroll, before he got fired by the Seahawks, they just kicked a field goal at the end of the game. It was completely meaningless. They were losing by like 30 points or something. He kicked the field goal like 1 second left. Made no sense, but it affected the point spread. And they had done something like
Bingo.
that earlier too. So they're making it really obvious. And again, I guess they want to make it obvious because you
I
wouldn't
think
be
so.
that obvious if you wouldn't be that obvious. But what do we do? And as I've said before, every NFL broadcast used to, say for express, for this is for entertainment purposes only, or something like that. They don't say that the games are legitimate, just like WWE wrestling. It's the same thing. Nobody says that this is an entertainment. The NFL and the NBA has never said it. They've never said that this is anything other than. So what can you do if you prove the game fix it? I'm researching my book now, and most of it's on the racial dynamics of sports, which is going to be the most controversial part. But I'm getting into the fixed stuff. The games being fixed, and here in my area, we had a former Redskin at the time who played for New England, a guy named Irving Schreiber, who was wide receiver for Nebraska. Years ago, he made a big splash when he came out and said, hey, it was because he dropped a few easy passes in the championship game, the NCAA championship game, Miami versus Nebraska. And at the time, everybody said, oh, God, how did was he paid off or something? And he came out and said he was paid off. And nobody asked him, well, who paid you off? And the story lasted. And now I'm telling you, I have used every search engine. Anybody out there wants to help me, Peter and Chris Graves are not big sports fans, so I'm winging this by myself. It's hard with that. Well, maybe you can help me, Karen. I can't find when you search for it on every search engine, they will not give you the story. And of course, I didn't save the Washington Post from back then. That is down the memory hole. They're acting like it. In fact, I found stories saying he denied doing it, which I remember it very clearly. Because I said, okay, finally I'm vindicated. I've been saying this is fixed for a long time. Nobody cared. I was paid to drop passes in the NCAA championship game. Well, you think you might want to ask who paid you? Nobody asked him. And it went right there. And then you had Bubba Smith, who was a big name. He ended up doing a lot of Miller Lite commercials until he made this statement. Then his acting career ended. He was in Police Academy movies too, where he came out and talked about the most fixed game of all time, the Super Bowl III, the Jets with Joe Namath predicting the victory. He came out and talked about how we all knew it was fixed and everything. That was it for Bubba. You didn't see him anymore after that. You guys, I don't know if you remember that, Vince, but
I remember Broadway Joe came to my little hometown, which was Rayford Johnson's hometown. He and Rayford Johnson came to town and made a Brute commercial one year.
Oh, do you remember?
Oh boy, the whole little town closed down and everybody just went wild following Broadway Joe and Rayford Johnson around town. That was a big deal. I have some autographed pictures. I have no idea where they are, but yeah, my hero or one of my favorites was Willie McCovey, and he actually died on Halloween. And that kind of did it for me. It's like, okay, why is he dying on Halloween? To me, I had heard so many conspiracy theories and by the numbers and things, and that pretty well did it for me. And I knew that the fix was in, and you've got the symbology with the baseball diamond and the stories of who actually originated these games and things. So, but I love sports.
Well, I do too, but I told people even back then, is that why would you, because I already realized that the Illuminati, whoever, we're all this is all controlled. Why would you think sports isn't? Why would you think they would leave that alone? I mean, especially now with DraftKings and the other one, and Dave Portnoy, that obnoxious clown with Barstool Sports and stuff that's made tons of money on this. With all the billions that are involved, and I have the figures in my book. I think it's officially, I don't know how many billions of dollars in sports betting. Why would you think that the people that are so corrupt and twist everything that they would just let that? Yeah, sure, I'll let the average schmuck, I'll let him decide, who's going to win. And no, they suck these kids in. And I know a lot of them. They on their cell phones. You can get the app for DraftKings and the other one that I'm forgetting, and they make it really easy. It's really easy to get sucked in. You don't have to go into used to have to go like to a casino or something where there's a sports book place and do it in person. Now you can go right on the app and they'll give you like, $200 in free play. You go in, they suck you in. And especially, and of course, everybody that follows sports thinks they know. Well, I could easily make money doing this. And I know I'm a sports expert. Well, you don't if the games are fixed, because
Bingo.
this goes back to this. Pete Rozelle, Any Given Sunday. Oliver Stone made a movie with that title. He wasn't talking about it being fixed, but once they convinced everybody that on any given Sunday anything could happen, they had you because nobody questions it then. How did you possibly lose those guys? You're much better. And any given Sunday, and if you're the fixers, that you have your mobsters are out there and who's going to win, and there's so many things now you can bet on the over under. You can have your minions go out and put tons of money on this if you know what's going to happen. And obviously they do. Like I said, that they got their boy Pete Carroll. Somebody phoned him on the sideline saying, "Hey, look, it's 1 second left, kick a field goal," and they did. And
Didn't
that's
somebody, Tom Brady or somebody, get caught deflating footballs?
well, that was actually ridiculous. That was I don't know what that was really a stupid thing. I didn't even understand it, but they used that as if they exposed something. That was nothing compared. You have the NBA had a referee named Tim Donaghy back about 10, 15 years ago that was found to have personally helped rig games by calling fouls, that's all they have to do in the NBA. Is you can you give one team 30 more free throws, and they're probably going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all they have to do. And,
unless it's Shaq, unless Shaq is the one handling
well, that's
your
true.
free
That's
throws
right.
gun.
Well, but they caught him, and they tried experiments like they tried an experiment where they mic'd up a referee early on, and like they canceled it after the first game because they had the guy walk over and he said, "How many?" He actually said after Shaq, you mentioned Shaq, "How many fouls does Shaq have now?" So this referee was concerned with how many fouls he had because he didn't want to call too many on him. I guess he wasn't supposed to foul out. Donaghy was laid out there as a sacrificial lamb and acted like he was the only one doing it, and they got rid of him quickly. But these games are so obviously fixed, and anybody's seen them for a long time. And if you participated in games, I never participated in a fixed game, but I can imagine
That
I
you
would
know of.
appreciate it. Yeah, but they don't go down that low. But you have had people talk about it, and but I got to find them. And in this sports book, it's really tough because they censor everything. It may seem like it's stupid stuff, sports, but it's censored completely. I have to
Yeah,
really search hard to find it.
in my opinion, it's not stupid. Because here's the thing is that even if you are not interested in sports, like from a fan perspective or like hanging out with your friends and family and watching the game, the social impact of professional sports is absolutely huge. These people are very influential on the youth. We know that. We know that the entire industry is money making. And this is from actually having people at the games, concessions, merchandise that they're selling online, the deals, the affiliated people that are working with for example, with the NFL, like Grubhub, DraftKings, like there is so much money to be made in sports. So it is absolutely important. And then we look at a lot of the stadiums are paid for by taxpayers. And so there's so many connections between this and culture and public and politics. And then of course, you have the corruption angle, the money left on the table for these games that are potentially being fixed. There's so many pieces here that are really, really important and indicative of just the hold and the importance that professional sports holds. And the other thing that I wanted to say about that is that actually I think I lost it. So I'm gonna throw it over. Anyway, I think it's important, Don. Corruption is corruption. Oh, I remembered. So as far as like Karen had said in the comments, bread and circuses. Yes, I definitely think that there's an element to that. And then I think with the kind of making it kind of obvious or letting people question if it's real, if it's fake, whatever that may be. I think that maybe part of that is just a little bit of demoralization because some people are such ardent fans. This is like their life. It is what they do outside of the day to day.
Yes.
And I think it's devastating for people to hear this news or to think that it may be fake. This is everything that they've got. It's their sense of community. And so I think that perhaps there's a piece of that, but I don't think it's going anywhere because it's so important. And then there's also the like Department of Defense contracts. They host the pre-show. They're flying the jets. You have the United States military propaganda that you see in this, and then this is also happening in the UFC. So I think that there's really something very, very important about the sports industry, and maybe I don't even fully understand it, but it's just mixing and weaving all of these parts that are something that people see, you know, in some form every single day, no matter the sport.
Tugger 619 has an interesting comment here. Tribalism intersecting with the occult, and I would add with merchandising or raking in the money. You've got the ad revenue, and then you've got the occult symbolism in the halftime shows and other places. And then, of course, Ashley mentioned the military programming, patriotism. Until recently, we sang the national anthem. You've got tracking and tracing and 5G in the stadiums. Geofencing and I wouldn't surprise me if you're being marketed to after you leave the sporting event, and we know that's happening in churches now. And then you also have the idolization by children so much in our culture. They want to be a musician, a sports star, and now you got TikTok influencer. But mostly, you know, we idolize. I idolized. I wanted to be a San Francisco Giant when I was a little kid, and I was angry when I realized I was a girl and I could never be a San Francisco Giant. I was not happy. So I had, you know, Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, Juan Marichal. Those are my heroes when I was a very little child.
Yeah. Oh, well, me too. And our friend R.B. Ham from the Great White North, we had to, you know, I can't do a show without talking about Jews. Why are all the commissioners of every major league sports Jews? Well, not everyone, R.B. Goodell's not a Jew, I don't think, but although his father was a United States senator, so that's how he got his job. But you're right, there are a lot of them. I don't know when the last NBA commissioner wasn't, but certainly Adam Silver is. But yeah, it's a good question to ask about all that. There's again, that's this disproportionate power thing, but you know, when you mentioned earlier, because people seem to like we're talking about sports. Actually, when you're talking about like injuries, again, I go back again, being a sports fan, playing sports, you know, so long ago, you didn't used to see these injuries. Gale Sayers was the first player I know of in football that had serious knee injuries constantly. And he was an anomaly. That didn't happen. You didn't hear about torn Achilles until the 70s. They started happening. Football, and again, I think when you're talking, and you didn't hear about concussions and people wanted to ban high school football and stuff. I'm convinced the reason is because they don't know how to tackle, and they especially with the huge influx of so many blacks and so many blacks from the wrong side of town, they play a different style. They like to hit with their heads, which is the wrong thing to do. You don't lead with your helmet, and the coaches play into that. How many helmets let's put a hat on them. Put hat on hat. No, you wouldn't hear Vince Lombardi or people talk like that. None of these players today know how to wrap up. They don't wrap. They fling themselves at them head first like missiles. And that's why they have so many head injuries. You didn't have all these, you had concussions, but nowhere near the amount you had back in the day. And I mean, they're bigger and stronger. Well, yeah, but it's all across the board. So the people the same size were still hitting each other. The people that are bigger are hitting bigger people. So I don't think that's it. So, but it's again, nobody talks about that because it gets into other areas. And in baseball, you know, that was my sport. And, you know, Tommy John surgery, that's named after Tommy John, who was a pitcher in the 60s and 70s. I think it was the late 70s when he had to have this arm surgery. And now every other pitcher has it done constantly, and you're out for a year when you do it. Yeah. And the fact they call it Tommy John surgery, well, where was Tommy John surgery before Tommy John?
Yeah.
You look at these pitchers, they used to pitch. Wilbur Wood just died recently, just the other day. And I remember him pitching, you know, double headers, complete games. This is in the 1970s. Today, my God, they would launch an investigation. What about the pitch count? Oh my God. I mean, they didn't have pitch counts back then. You think Walter Johnson and Cy Young and those guys, why didn't their arms fall off?
My
Remember
my
Dave
theory
Gravecki?
my theory, Don, is that, well, like we talked about the combination of things, but a lot of times if you see people these days that have their kids in sports, they start them very, very, very young.
They do,
And
yeah.
I don't mean like, oh, you're just playing summer ball or you're playing fall ball. I mean, you are playing ball all year round.
Yes.
And there are some
Yep.
areas that are really known to be good farm areas, and North Carolina is one of those. There's a lot of really strong teams, and that's in softball and baseball. But these kids start early, and they start fast pitch early for girls, and they start traditional pitching early for boys. And there does need to be somebody who has a consideration for the biomechanical toll that pitching that much at that early of an age takes. And they don't do that. They don't have that. And what they do is, at the very least, they do worry about the pitch count. But it's my contention that, among other factors, the very early age and constant grind that these children are put on in order to get to these levels of success is a huge factor. And really quick, on Tommy John surgery, I actually had a chance to meet Tommy John. I was working at a minor league baseball stadium when I was in high school, and I worked. My position was known as the Crawdads. We were the Crawdads because it was the Crawdads. So I had a chance to meet him, and then also after John Smoltz, who was an absolutely instrumental, one of the most incredible pitchers for the Atlanta Braves in the 90s, he ended up having Tommy John surgery. But after that, I always laughed and felt like he had a bionic arm after he had that, because he came back as a closing pitcher, and he did that for a couple of years, and he said, I want to be pitching a game again. And he came back, and he was like incredibly successful after that. But all that's a good point, and I'll stop blabbing about all this stuff now.
I have a child athlete in my family. She's in college now, but she's had several knee surgeries. She's a soccer player, and she's playing at a junior college now, but she's been sidelined several times and had major surgeries on her knee. And I just wonder, how is she going to do? She's 19, 20 now, and she's had several knee surgeries. And I just think there's a time when you need to hang it up. And I also know people who have kept their children back a year in school or entered them late into kindergarten so that they would be older when they were competing at the high school level. And then I've had my niece was recruited by junior colleges to be a basketball player, female basketball player. My nephew, he's the one who had the concussions, and I know my brother talked about the expense of his helmets, his football helmets that had the proper padding, and that he could only take so many hits per helmet, and then he had to get a new helmet. So that was a consideration also. So I tend to agree with Dawn that sports have become much more extreme. And then you've got things like gymnastics and figure skating, where the diet is just
swimming.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Those kids practice at like 5 a.m. and stuff like that. And again, they're all just like in sports. And you can see Raybo talk. Look at that. There's nobody I knew in high school that would have had no major surgeries. I don't remember anybody having major 4 shoulder surgeries, a knee surgery, and numerous concussions. I mean, that's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry to hear that, Raybo, but I don't understand it. And it makes again, if you look back on the history of sports and you look at how many games were missed with injuries, and there weren't very many. And I mean, you can say those guys were tougher, or they weren't, if they're better shape now, it seems that should make you tougher. But it does. I don't know. I think it's part of it. I think it's, because I think they're all rigged, and I think it's kind of baked in to the thing. But even just on what I noticed when I was coaching sports, because youth, of course, I'm coaching at the lowest level of youth sports, but you notice that the same players tend to get injured all the time. Like, you're going to have one kid on the team that's going to fall down in practice all the time, and you're going to have some kid that's so tough that nothing's going to hurt him or her. Either. I mean, I had those, and you just knew instantly, okay, this is the guy I'm going to have to deal with every practice. My coach, I'm limping around, maybe crying, and that kind of stuff. I think maybe there's an element of that too. You had somebody like Brett Favre who took all those hits all those years. You couldn't injure him. You literally couldn't hurt him. But you have other guys that get hurt every year if you look at them. So, and I don't know what that means. If it's but it's just it's something that I've noticed. But sports is definitely, in terms of the injury factor, you did not, especially you play fantasy football like I do, and it's ridiculous. It's hard to field a team. The teams are everybody's getting hurt all the time. And a lot of times you see the injuries, like I saw that Bo Nix tackle, and it was just a regular tackle. How would you possibly fracture your foot? I did not see anything. I don't understand that. But that's one of the reasons why I'm writing the book. We've ended up talking tons about sports, but looks like some people like it. And you mentioned Dave Dervecki, Karen. He lost his arm, right? Did he lose his arm to cancer? But did they claim it was from pitching or something? Did he develop cancer of the arm from pitching, or what is it?
I don't know if they claimed that, but he did do radiation or chemotherapy and had surgery and came back and pitched some more.
Yeah. No, it's terrible. Says
Well,
John
I can jump in to be. I can be an outlier for you.
Sure.
Now, I was track and field mostly through the late 70s. And Don's met some of my teammates. They're part of my lunch crew. And I was getting hurt all the time. And after years afterwards, I learned really why I was having problems pulling hamstrings. My main event was hurdles, but I also did the triple jump and the long jump. And I can tell you, if anybody has a son or daughter trying to do that stuff, don't. Just pull them out of it. It's bad for the legs. It's bad for the knees. It's bad for the hips. But I was using what they call the universal weight set. It's a big modular system. I know a lot of people out there remember what that's all about.
Yeah, universally, absolutely. That's the way it was back then.
And with my quadriceps, I could do the whole stack, 500 and some pounds, with somebody standing on it. I could do that 30 times. They were huge. And I tried to get onto the system for the hamstring. And the hamstring system was nowhere near the ability to match what the quadricep was doing. So what happened through time, as a senior, I ended up snapping my hamstring. And that, long story short, I went to a sports medicine doctor. Now, this is 1979. And he was well known. He did work for the Redskins, this guy. In any case, I had 2 weeks to get ready for a district meet, and that would be my last one. And I only had 60%. I did get 60% of the hamstring back. But that doctor told me what happened. He said that your quadriceps are so strong that your hamstrings did not equal the power and snapped them. And he said, if you try to run again, you're going to snap it again, and you may never walk straight for the rest of your life. I tried to run again. It snapped. And I even some dummy did a false start. And I knew right then and there it just wasn't going to make it. So I crashed through every hurdle through the 120 yards, bang, 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 bang. And that was it. That was the end of the game. And the doctor was right. For a long time, I didn't walk straight. And now I'm in my middle 60s, so I got other things that make me limp.
You're walking fine. Yeah, no, but I do think that Karen and Ashley both touched on this. Is again, I saw so much of this with my kids playing sports. My son was really, really good at soccer, and so he played travel from an early age. And they, the travel leagues, just like select basketball and baseball too. They, I don't know if they have for football, but because football is not as big when you're little, but it's a huge moneymaker. They're very expensive. Every time when he played travel for years, and every other month, they're asking you for another $200, $300. And it's such a huge money, and they play on the egos of the parents. So they would come, and I'd be coaching 8-year-old girls in basketball, and what a couple that could dribble. That was about it. None of them were select players. but they would have people coming after like one of the girls, trying to talk her. And I told the parents, I said, I don't think let her shine a while in the house league, see how she does. But it's very expensive. She might not play there, but parents usually get talked into it by that, and it's a huge. In the case of like soccer, it was all year round. In the winter, they played indoor soccer and that kind of stuff. And baseball now they do fall ball, and in basketball, they play year round. We played summer basketball too. But these are commitments, and you're right. And the thing about it is, all those years I coached, I coached against some good players and coached some really good players. And there was not one player that went on to anything ever. That's how the odds against it are astronomical. But every parent thinks their kid's got to do it, and that's what keeps it going. It's the same thing you mentioned: gymnastics and swimming. And they get that commitment more. Hey, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. Let's go practice and let's go swim for an hour or whatever. And then you got to go to school. What time do you go to bed to do that? And again, it's the hope of I'm going to be an Olympian. That's the dream. And how many Olympians is there? That's why you remember what was her name? I felt so bad for her. Probably 2 Olympics ago, she was like favored, I think, and she messed up on her jump. And the camera zoned in on her crying it was just, they really exploited her. And I thought, this girl worked all her life for this moment, and then she had a misstep, and that's what she'll be remembered for. And you idiots, you zoomed in our humiliation. And it's something, and here, I'm a huge competitive guy, but I can understand why people don't believe in competitive sports. I remember there was a show was on briefly, a very Jewish show called Brooklyn Bridge. But I watched it. I don't know. I just thought it was fun. And I remember the mother there had words of wisdom. It was after a basketball game, and one of the kids, made a free throw at the end of the game to win it. So, of course, it was these big hero and stuff. Somehow they ended up where she was saying, well, I'm thinking of the kid that misses a free throw. And then you think about that. Remember they made that movie with Robin Williams and Kurt Russell? About how Robin Williams had dropped a big pass in a big game in high school, and he never could get over it. And you wouldn't. If you're a high school player in a big game and you miss a free throw at the end of the game, how do you get past that? I don't know how you can see what happened. Bill Buckner's life in baseball. Bill Buckner's life was never the same after he let the ground ball go through his legs in the World Series. Yeah, I mean he was devastated mentally. And I think it killed him before his time. But so that's the downside of competitive sports. But still still draws me in for some reason. I don't know. I'm rambling.
Well, I think that human achievement is something that is something that we're all interested in. When you do watch, like you're talking about the Olympics, the 96 Olympics, when I was growing up, and I watched the United States team basically perform a miracle when Carrie Scruggs, like they were absolutely killing it. She had an ankle injury. She landed on it. I mean, it was like, I still get cold chills. So watching people perform at a very high level, there's something very attractive about that to us, and something very admirable, and what the sacrifice and the hard work that it takes to get there. So those things are important. But on the same note, or on the same other side of the coin, I agree with you. I think about this when I see people's children, in some cases, not really have much quality of life because of the pressure that's being put on them in the sports world. And I think to myself, to what end? Because exactly what you said, do you think that your child is making it to X, Y, and Z, and they're going to be a millionaire forever after, and they're going to take care of the whole family? You're sacrificing your child, literally, not only their potential physical health for the injury issue, but you are sacrificing what they could have as a childhood, playing in the woods, playing in the backyard, whatever, or the pressure that you put on them as a very demanding parent is taking away from their quality of life and their opportunity to simply be a child. So I think that is a huge consideration. Now, I think that there are some places sometimes when it was absolutely meant to be, because you see a child who plays a sports, and that's all they can think about because they love it so much. They're obsessed with it. And I think that it needs to be child driven if that's the route that they want to go, but they need to have an opportunity. And I think, like you're saying, Don, as far as, making a mistake in the big game or whatever that is, I think it's goes to the mental constitution of the athlete, which is important. This is where the coach and the team and the parents come in, because if you have an attitude of like, yeah, well, Michael Jordan missed, how many important big games, right? So it's a matter of your ability to try to come back from this, because it happens to everybody, including great athletes. But you need to have a support system in place that facilitates you forgiving yourself for blowing, for missing the basket or whatever that may be.
Well, you remember the Karen Wright, remember this? She's in California. It was I guess the California Angels then. They were playing the Red Sox in probably the 90s, I want to say. And I think his name was Donnie Moore. It's Donnie something. He's a relief pitcher. And he gave up a home run to Henderson. I can't remember, I think. And that,
Ricky Henderson?
that lost the series for the Angels. And he ended up killing himself. He literally couldn't take it. It was like a year or two later, because that's what he was known for. He gave up a home run.
That makes sense. And I just wanted to mention, wasn't there a Dodger fan that killed a Giants fan in the stands at a game? There was.
Yeah, I don't know, but there's been some crazy. I know that there was a guy that interfered with the ball, and was it the Orioles and the Yankees or something? And I know he was threatened and stuff, but I'm not sure. But I'm sure it's happened before, because if you've been in the
Dodger
stands,
Stadium, the Giants and Dodgers are huge rivals, and I believe a Giants fan got murdered at a Dodger game by a Dodger fan who is angry. So that's not good. I just want to mention the monetization, even in high school sports. My sister-in-law is a florist, and it used to be there was homecoming, and there would be some pomp and circumstance around flowers and fancy dresses and old cars at homecoming. But now there's a homecoming, there's a senior night every year where every senior gets introduced. The family's expected to buy flowers and balloons for their child, roses for each senior. There were some seniors whose family couldn't afford the fluff, the swag. So there were donations taken by kind-hearted, quote, individuals, public-minded individuals, to buy swag for the seniors who wouldn't have the flowers and the balloons that everybody else had. There were families who made T-shirts for each senior athlete, and this is at a football game. But this happened at the basketball games. And to me, it's just the amount of money that goes for those type of things. Everybody, can't afford that. It's ridiculous. And I think it's kind of the everybody gets a prize mentality in a way.
Participation trophy, yeah.
Yeah. And then so I see a lot of parents living through their children in a way. Yes. And that's gone back since when I was a kid and at Little League, watching my brothers play Little League, and some parents getting angry and living through their child. But I think it's become a lot worse these days. And I think you even have a lot of parents that probably are distracted at games and aren't realizing behavior their children are taking part in. Or
remember you had not that long ago, and I don't, somewhere in maybe the Midwest, a parent killed a hockey coach at a youth hockey game. Remember that? He actually killed him. And hockey, I have no experience with my kids or anything with that, but that's incredibly expensive. Of all the sports, that's the most expensive. And so you have to really be committed financially to that. So I guess maybe if I was sinking a couple $1,000s and they weren't playing my kid, I'd be mad too. I wouldn't kill the coach, but I mean, it's the problem. That's the drawback with competitive sports. I said, I'm very competitive, but I hate it about myself. I hate it about myself. And I'm
not competitive.
I just saw that. I was just down at his bar there, where he does it at the bar there, where he does these interviews. But oh yeah, I mean, no, the only trophies I still have are my fantasy football trophies. My baseball trophies broke, but they weren't the last. But you see, Adam 12 said he was a pro skier, X Games, big error in 2001. Now 45-year-old guy, the old injuries haunting me, wrist, elbow. Yeah, it's I understand the older athlete, but again, I just don't think you had especially baseball players. Baseball is not a contact sport, so that's what I played most, and that's why I've never understood people getting injured playing baseball. I don't get it. I almost never saw an injury, in baseball, and so we had a guy like, and for the Nationals here, we had a guy Steven Strasburg, a pitcher, who I used to say he was the biggest pussy ever. I mean, I loved him, but he could not stay healthy, and and they coddled him, and he should have been great, but they just same thing with Bryce Harper, who's another great player. Getting he would foul. I remember one time he fouled a ball off his foot and went on the 21-day disabled list. I mean, in Little League, we foul balls off, and you wouldn't miss the at bat. I mean, they would they would make fun of you if you did. But I mean, I don't understand it, and again, maybe it's baked into that or whatever. But if you look at some of the old time players, there's a story about Ty Cobb, who's kind of the epitome of that, who had his tonsils removed one morning and played a game later that night, when he's supposed to be still bleeding and stuff. He just knocked back probably some whiskey and chewing tobacco or whatever. And so, they were a different breed, but they would laugh at these injuries. They really would. And so I don't know what the reason is, but it seems to me the sports science and the people being involved in it, it's resulted in players getting a lot more injuries, which makes no sense. Why should the drunk guys back in the day, why should they have never gotten injured? And you got these guys that are looked at constantly that are constantly developing injuries. I don't know. Did they have a bunch of undiagnosed injuries then? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Anybody?
Yeah, I guess I could go get my CYO trophies from 5th grade for bowling.
Yeah.
You remember the duck pin alley over there on the Offley Highway, Don?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
CYO Bowling League, yeah. Second high score, too.
Cool. And you still
Duck
got
pin.
one. They gave you better trophies than Annandale Little League did. I don't know, mine fell apart pretty quick, but yeah. So we ended up talking about sports all the time. Getting almost out of time. We've talked sports, nothing but sports. Hopefully, people liked it. I know there are people there that aren't sports fans. Chris Buchan is probably upset we're not talking more about Jews. I did put up RB Ham's comment about Jewish owners, so hopefully that got you. But so what are we looking at now in terms of I don't know what is the so we have this board of peace, and we have what is first of all, what does this even mean? Or are we going to have World War III? I have to ask this every show because we never do, and I don't think we're going to. But we're always on the verge of it. Are we close to World War III at this point? Let's put some fear porn out there before the weather comes here and gives us real fear porn.
I think we're in World War III, and it's against us.
Yes.
I think that's a great a point, and I certainly cannot deny that. I will say, though, and like I had talked about this earlier, because a hot war is such an effective way to kill fighting age men, I cannot take it out of my consideration that an active hot war is still something that we are going to be seeing. I definitely agree with Karen that war is being declared on us in a million different ways, like everything they've ever learned from history, and then pairing it with their sci-fi think tanks to get what we have today. But I absolutely feel like there is a potential for a hot war at some way, somehow. I hope that I'm wrong about that, but I just feel like that has been such an effective element to not only cause fear in a population, and it causes a sacrifice from that population. If you're sending your men and women off to fight, I think that is a factor. And then, of course, it provides a way for you to actively destroy the place where the war is taking place, which could be very, very convenient. And we did see that in Vietnam. What they did was it was a meat grinder. First of all, 3 million Vietnamese approximately were taken off the board. We had I don't remember, I feel like it was maybe close to 2 million drafted from the United States. And we know that the people that were grunts were used actively as meat grinders, and there was an obsession with body counts. And that was considered the only way for you to be able to actually get ahead. But also what it did was fracture a country into false North and South that did not exist before. And the United States were bankrolling the French as they actively lost to the Vietnamese. They, of course, trained Ho Chi Minh before turning on him. They were able to install a puppet dictatorship many times over in South Vietnam. But what they also did was deploy the Phoenix program. And that was one of, according to the author, Doug Valentine, this was one of the early experiments of the technocracy of the surveillance state, because they were surveilling people when they weren't murdering, and torturing and burning villages and things like that. That's what they used it for. And for a lot of different reasons, but they ended up moving this kind of agrarian society to more of a city society, and rebuilding was part of that. That was a stated part of the plan even back then. So I think that the war element is really something that I do think it's possible.
Let me throw in real quick. The Hmong people that were used by the American forces in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, the Hmong people were many put in camps in Thailand, and then a lot of them are in my area. They resettled here, so I've had a lot of Laotian Hmong children in class over the years. My husband works with Hmong people. And also I know Deb in our circle, Deb and Brian and Deb McCartney, they live in Minnesota where a lot of Hmong people resettled. So it is a way to, and they were agrarian. They didn't have a written language before they were interfered with. So I know here in Central California, they do have a written language. People learn to speak Hmong. There are Hmong courses and literature in the colleges here, in the high schools. And so it completely changed their way of life, and it has a lasting impact on the culture. And generationally, those people don't remember. I know some go back to Thailand, whereas their ancestors were actually from Laos, but they go back to Thailand because their grandparents were born in the camps in Thailand. So, and I do remember watching the Vietnam War every night on the 6 o'clock news and the carnage.
Yeah, traumatizing the people back home.
Absolutely.
And people lost family members, fiancés, brothers, uncles, husbands, fathers. And so not only are you eliminating part of the population, you're traumatizing. And in addition to that, you're feeding the war machine.
My dad lost several students. He was a high school teacher, so he lost a lot of students too.
Yeah, the military industrial complex is the beast is being fed from this as well. And then, like Karen was saying, and it with having those people come to this country, not that they didn't assimilate and aren't part of the community, but you see what happens is that you are able to facilitate and create migration of other cultures into a new place. So I think that that's an important thing. And then you're traumatizing the people there for generations as well. That was one of the big issues in Vietnam, was that the people were, the land, generational land was very important to them because of their religious beliefs and the tie-ins with their ancestors. And this was something that they were separated from as well. So there's a lot of purposes being served by war.
No, absolutely. There's no question about that. Wars always serves their purposes. So we've covered lots of sports here. Vince, what are your thoughts on that?
On Vietnam, I think you can go back to JFK, where he was probably not for that plan. And we know that these plans had come into Eisenhower's administration, and Eisenhower threw Kissinger out of the White House, wouldn't let him back in. I think I've mentioned this before. Patrick Moynihan.
Mhm.
Patrick Moynihan came out of Harvard, and he was born in Oklahoma. Ended up at the end of his career, he becomes a senator for New York, the state of New York. So he created something, and I don't have it with me. Normally I do, but it's a Soviet analysis program. And as it turns out, that whole thing was a fraud. He had actually, in around 59, 60, cooked up this idea to sell to both Democrats and Republicans that China and Russia were having a split. Now, you guys have heard this before. You've heard about the Soviet-Sino split. And the whole thing was supposedly coming out of a group in Bonn, Germany. It even says it on the title, from Bonn, Germany. So I just recently went looking at that information and found it on a Harvard website where they show that, in fact, Moynihan, while at Harvard, published this stuff from Harvard. Had nothing to do with Germany, West Germany, East Germany. And that son of a gun gets to go up from, I'm trying to remember who's, oh gosh, he belonged to some Democrat governor, might have been in New York. And then I think Rockefeller beat him out. And then he jumped in with JFK and that administration, moved into Department of Labor, and just kind of worked his way up. He had attention from. I'm sorry,
Udall. I think JFK's Secretary of Labor was Udall.
Oh, no. He wasn't Secretary of Labor. He was like an assistant secretary. My dad actually had dealt with him. Said he was a real jerk, and all he wanted to do was start fights so he could fix them. Now, in the end, he ends up moving up through Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And he even, as he became senator, became a friend of Reagan, along with this Sino-Soviet split that helps push money at the war machine. All of that just kind of fed from one thing to the other. And I think even going back to the end of World War II, as you guys know, you had the Club of Rome. You had all these crazy, insane people in Europe who wanted to take back control. And that's where I go to the royal families. And I think you've just seen with this business of Greenland, the king of Denmark comes out and says something. That guy sits back for 50 years, doesn't say a word. And then there's this king all of a sudden. You look at the British, they're over 50% Islamic from Africa. And what have you heard from the royal family? Nothing. They're okay with it. What are you going to do? Hell, they're the ones, pardon my language, they're the ones who created the kingdoms in what we call the Middle East during the First World War.
They think they still have their empire. We're just about out of time. I want to give you each a chance. Any closing thoughts, Karen, or anything you want to promote?
I just say thoughts and prayers for everybody who's facing this storm. Please try not to live in fear and be prepared and have your supplies, your light, the basic necessities, including your own self-protection. Stay warm. Try to find somebody to snuggle up with, or your favorite pets. Guard your humanity. I'm on Nights of the Storm with Ashley, Saturdays at 11 Pacific, 2 o'clock Eastern. Tomorrow we're having Courtney Turner join us. So I hope to see some of you there. Vance, it was really awesome.
Thank you.
To chat with you today.
Good to see you.
You always too, Ashley. And thank you so much for the opportunity, Don. God bless. And I hope your niece continues to improve.
She's getting a little better. We're trying to stay, keep hope alive. Yeah. Keep everybody updated. Ashley, how about you?
My thoughts and prayers.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, I think that Karen said it very, very well, and I have loved being on this show. Vince, I apologize. I feel like I was blabbing too much, and maybe we didn't get to hear from you as much as we would have liked to, but it was really nice meeting you. Dawn, I always appreciate the invitation to come on your show, and I'm just very grateful for that opportunity. Karen, as you know, always love talking with you and hearing, what your brain thinks about all this stuff. So it was really good. Everyone in the chat, thank you so much. It was nice and busy over here tonight, so it was good to see that. So thanks again.
Ladies, thank you very much. Kind comments, and I don't have to interrupt you if you're telling us the truth. So why bother interrupting?
Anything you need to promote, Mr. Agnelli?
Well, I sent some of these to Mr. Ham.
Okay, RB Ham, yeah.
And I hope I hope he gets it. I hope they can use it, because I told him in a little note, I said, don't let them become an independent state. I wouldn't worry about becoming part of the United States. And when you do become an independent country, don't let the parties get in. Keep that business out. That's the root of all of our problems. Thank you, Don, for having me.
Oh, thank you, Vince. It's always a pleasure, my friend. You guys are great. I love having you. So we'll see. I may reserve the right to do this again, because I have a hard time. I want certain people, and they don't get back to you for a long time, or they get back to you and then they cancel at the last minute. So it is what it is, But I really appreciate you guys stepping in. Lots of great comments in the chat. Thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate it. So yes, we'll hopefully the power won't go off for anybody. So let's keep hope alive for those ancient power grids and those Chinese sensors, because we're depending on them. Hopefully it'll be okay. Everybody stay safe with the crazy geoengineered weather, and maybe people will protest. There's Vince's trophy, so he's got that going. Thanks so much, Karen, Ashley, Vince. You guys are great. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next week, same time for I Protest. Take care.